Oh no, I can't stop playing Balatro. I'm gonna run out of time to do this week's video, but I just can't put it down! Samurai Shodown. Hey wait, that's not an RPG. Yes, you're correct for the most part. Samurai Shodown is a long-running fighting game series by SNK. Swords and samurai slicing and dicing in feudal Japan. There's been about 3,000 of these games, and they are all fighting games, except for one. In 1997, SNK released Shinsetsu Samurai Spirits Bushido Retsuden, known in the West as Samurai Shodown RPG. Now, I say that with the caveat that this entry in the series was and is Japan only. And this is despite the loads of articles, screenshots, and previews in video game magazines of the day. Samsho RPG never made it to the West. Until now. Well, kinda. In late 2023, a fan translator known as Moriamug released the long-awaited fan translation for this title, and I, as someone who wanted to play this game since way back in the day, completely missed it because I am not up to date on fan translations. But then, I found it in early February in 2024, and hype revived itself. So, I picked up the, totally legal and official copy of the game, easily available on all the big digital distribution channels, and fired it up. And this is that story. So, I'm Richard from RPG Fortress, and this is Shinsetsu Samurai Spirits Bushido Retsuden, or Samurai Shodown RPG. 15-year-old me is so excited right now. The first Samurai Shodown, Samurai Spirits in Japan, was released in 1993 by SNK for Japanese arcades. The game was very popular and was eventually ported to just about everything. I remember playing it loads on the Genesis when I was a snot-nosed goblin creature. Samsho was never as hot as Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but it had a big enough cult following. The game is a fighting game, so you know the score, 1-on-1, hack, slash, dash, jump, duck, slice dice, etc. It's a fighting game, with swords. Samurai Shodown was one of the first weapons-based fighters. The game also had this great feudal Japanese low magic kind of thing going on. So, with all of these cool parts moving in tandem, it's no wonder the series developed a tight little fan base. And as the years passed, we got Samurai Shodown 2, then 3, then 4. I didn't play all of these games, so I can't really comment on what trajectory the series took, but needless to say, these first 4 titles were all fighting games. And then along came 1997, and SNK decided to shake things up by releasing Shinsetsu Samurai Spirits Bushido Retsuden, a whole gosh darn role-playing game. Now, if you don't mind me quoting AVGN, what were they thinking? I mean, an RPG is as far away as you can get from a fighting game. Unless they developed Samurai Shodown Checkers, but I don't think that game is real. But SNK, the company known for its fighting games, made an RPG. I'm not sure why. My guess is that after years and years of doing arcade-only games, the company realized they could do a slower-paced game at home thanks to the Neo Geo, or in this case, the Neo Geo CD. During development, the game was planned to have 3 chapters, but due to time and money, the 3rd chapter was scrapped. And it's almost a good thing because they were planning on dividing up the 3 chapters between the Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Saturn. So you had to double dip to get all 3 chapters. What a dumb idea. Anyway, the game never came to the West. I remember seeing pictures and reading articles about the game in game magazines back in the day. I was stoked. The game looked and sounded amazing, but it just wasn't meant to be. The game never saw the light of day and remained in Japan. I guess SNK didn't think it would be profitable release over here, so oh well. chalk it up to the fans to correct this omission, albeit it took them over 25 years to do so. Sam's Show RPG's story is pretty okay, to be honest, but that's because I'm comparing it to the fighting games, which A, have sparse story, and B, are translated horribly. It's no dark secret that SNK's translations, especially in the early days, are just absolutely tragically bad. Over the decades, professional outlets and the internet as a whole have devoted themselves to time and time again portraying these accidents of English as what they are. Silly. So it's wild to see that in this fan translation, a level of professionalism that the official games didn't have. At no point did I have to scratch my head at broken English or even laugh at how absurd the translation is. The fan translation is very good. You start the first 2 chapters in the semi-mystical legendary land of feudal Japan as one of 6 Samurai Shodown characters. The swordsman Ukyo, the priestess Nakaruru, the swordsman Haomaru, the swordsman Genjuro, the wild child Cham Cham, or the ninja swordsman Galford. All 6 of these characters have their own starting area with little personalized scenarios for them. Very cool. After you pass through the opening area, I chose Nakaruru because of course I did, you head for Edo. Once reaching medieval Tokyo, you get to choose your second and third party members. These consist of some of the other leader characters, but also a couple that aren't, like Charlotte, and of course I chose Charlotte. The characters that you meet seem to be slightly randomized, as I've watched a couple of different videos of the opening of this game, and some players have 1 or 2 different choices. It might also be based on whoever your lead character is. I didn't want to start the game 6 times. The story continues on to explain that the land is being rocked by earthquakes and that a fiendish man named Amakusa is probably responsible. This is pretty much all you have to go on. Seemingly each new area you go to has its own issues going on, and Amakusa is seemingly responsible for just about all of it. The story is basically wander from town to town, solving everyone's problems, and slowly getting closer to Amakusa. It's not a great story, and it's not told well, but compared to the fighting games, it's practically biblical in scope. Speaking of the Bible, you actually find a town full of secret Christians. Pretty weird. But weirdly enough, Christianity plays into the ending events of Chapter 1, as weird as that sounds for a Samurai Shodown game. The second chapter has a similar story, but instead of the big bad being named Amakusa, it's another villain named Mizuki. What's the difference? Amakusa was a resurrected saint who turned evil, and Mizuki is a resurrected shrine maiden turned evil. Look, it's an old RPG. This is the story for all of them. There's a bad guy doing bad things and you need to stop them. Okay, go. The second chapter compared to the first chapter starts off pretty rough. Nothing at all carries over from Chapter 1. You are starting from scratch. No levels carry over, no gear, no skills, nothing. After starting Chapter 2 with Nakaruru and seeing that I was starting from level 1 with no gear, and I lost her super hawk dive attack or whatever it's called, I simply restarted and opted to choose different characters. Thankfully, Cham Cham very quickly gets an attack all enemies skill. But seriously, what a crappy decision. I almost didn't want to play Chapter 2 when I saw this, and what if they actually had finished Chapter 3 and put it in the game? Would we be starting off at default levels for a third time? Why would you do this to us? I was really enjoying this game up until Chapter 2. You fucking sucking hamster spoon-licking zoopophiles. Anyway, Chapter 2 is a bit less structured than Chapter 1. The game world is now not just limited to wandering around Japan, but you actually get to explore other parts of the larger world. Everything is connected with this underground tunnel system and warps. It seems pretty cool because it leads you to believe that you can explore things a little bit more loosely, but that's a trap. Now, you can technically do a little bit of sequence breaking. I ended up going to France before going to China, and I could begin the events there, but I was very weak. I hadn't found a blacksmith in quite some time, and I was doing really bad amounts of damage. I had no idea why, but the blacksmith in France was inaccessible. His door wouldn't open. I tried to grind, but I was too weak to do so. At this stage, I had enough, and I pulled up not just a guide, but the guide. There's literally only a single guide to the Mizuki section on the internet. And when I read this guide, it specifically said, go to China before France. So I did a very long backtrack through some caves, and I got to China. And after 2 boss fights, the Chinese blacksmith opened, and I leveled up my weapons as far as I could, and I began to grind again. The first chapter, I didn't do a lot of grinding. Specifically, I only needed to grind when I wanted to. If I didn't have enough money to buy all of the armor or weapon upgrades in a town, I did a little bit of grinding. I don't mind grinding. I enjoy it sometimes. I like grinding when it's my choice. I love the satisfaction of working on a character to increase their strength. But the grinding in Chapter 2 is mandatory, and it needs to be done often. Towns are fewer and further in between, and thusly, armor shops and blacksmiths are fewer and further in between. So, you are going to be engaging in several boss fights with no upgrades. This one boss fight I had against this tough wolf dude was followed up 10 steps later by a stronger wolfman who had 2 copies of the previous wolfman I fought 10 steps earlier. Why? This is absolute barbarism, and it made me very grumpy. This is Phantasy Star 2 levels of grinding, and it wasn't fun then, and it isn't fun now. Anyway, old game, simple story, but it's wrapped up in some really bad gameplay design. A lot of the gameplay in Samurai Shodown RPG is pretty old school RPG. If you have ever played any old Final Fantasy or whatever, you'll have a leg up starting this game. You walk around, you talk to people, you visit towns, you visit dungeons, you smack goblins, you level up. It's all very straightforward for us RPG players because we play RPGs. I can't imagine what it would have been like for a fighting game fan to pick this up and try to play it because, like I said, once again, fighting games and RPGs are so diametrically opposite of each other. That being said, there is an option that some fighting game fans may prefer. You have 2 options when it comes to combat. Your standard RPG fare, you go into a skill menu, choose the skill you want, and then it does its thing. It's very basic stuff. Alternatively, you can choose an option to actually input button combinations like a fighting game to use your skills. It's a pretty interesting choice, but I hated Sabin's moves in Final Fantasy VI, so I didn't even bother trying them here. If there is one gameplay mechanic that I have to complain about this game, it's a big one. The encounter rate is out of this fucking world. You are going to be constantly getting into random fights. A lot of RPGs with random battles will have a formula for generating a random battle every X steps. This way, they don't appear to happen like every 4 or 5 or 6 steps. Samsho RPG does not do this. You are literally going to get into a fight every 6 steps. This leads to a lot of fights, and a lot of fights lead to a lot of loading. And once you have recruited your party members, you can count on almost every single battle having 4 or 5 enemy units to fight. This is absolutely insane. The constant battles made me roll my eyes more than once, and several times I found myself putting down the controller and walking away to try and chill out. Shinsetsu, Samurai Spirits, Bushido, Ritsuden has the worst encounter rate in any RPG I have ever played. So one thing I'm not sure about is that this game has active time battle. Yeah, active time battle, ATB, like in the older Final Fantasy games, or Chrono Trigger. So while battling, if you don't act fast enough, the enemy essentially will take a turn. Big problem that I have with this is that there's no on-screen ATB meter, so you can't really gauge where anyone is at. I just found myself time and time again trying to take an action and just getting walloped by the enemies. Now, if you play the PlayStation version does have an ATB meter, but I played the Neo Geo CD version, legitimately, and that version doesn't have the ATB meter, so I was constantly struggling and having heart palpitations because I didn't know when the enemy was going to act. I guess I didn't like it very much. Now, something that I did like, because it reminds me of Suikoden, is that you don't buy weapons, you level up your default starting weapon at a blacksmith in towns. Every now and then, while visiting towns, you'll find a blacksmith and they'll be able to raise your weapon a couple of levels for the right amount of gold. And just like in Suikoden, each blacksmith that you find will be able to raise your weapon just a couple of levels incrementally until you find the next blacksmith. And also like in Suikoden, they can add elemental power to your weapons, but I never use that in either of these games. While traveling, you'll come across these training spots that will allow you to fight a quote-unquote tough battle to get some new skills for your dudes. The battles aren't really that tough though, they're usually just against normal enemies, but you do learn some great skills from them. I didn't have any real problems with any of these battles at all, and usually the skills that I learned were pretty decent. Some of these are kinda out of the way, some of them are just in town, but really it's just a pretty easy way to get some skills, or sometimes it's just experience, which I guess is okay too. The game's graphics look really good. It has these huge expressive sprites that are so really well animated. The walk animations, especially Nakaruru, are just so buttery smooth. Now you're gaming with Vaseline. The backgrounds are also very expressive, the towns look good, there's lots to just look at. Well, unless you're in a cave, I guess. Also, the character portraits are very, very small. What's the deal with that? The music? Well, I hope you like taiko drums. The fact that this game got a fan translation in late 2023 is wild and wonderful to me. There have been a few attempts by fans to translate this game previously, but they all ended up falling off. Thankfully, Moriamug finally got it down. I'll try to remember to put a link in the video notes, but I just got home from work and I'm exhausted, so if it's not there, I fell asleep. The legacy of this game is, well, it's non-existent. There was no sequel, there was no re-release, there is just the original version. Now, it was released on the Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Saturn, so you do have a few different places to play it, if you can get your hands on a totally legit and legal copy, that is. Samurai Shodown is still around. A new game gets released every 5 to 10 years, so that's something, right? I played a bunch of the most recent title, it's called Samurai Shodown, a few months back, and it's pretty good. Any chance to spend a bit of time with Nakaruru is time well spent. I did have some fun with this game. I greatly preferred Chapter 1 over Chapter 2. The game is truly a bit of a mess, but I did enjoy most of it. The gameplay was alright, the graphics were great, the music was alright, the character designs are great, the story was alright, the fact that I finally got to play it was great. I have a feeling that mouth-breathing 15-year-old Richard would have loved this game a lot more than today's bad back, oh I'm so old Richard did. I am very happy that I finally got to play it, I just wish that I enjoyed it more. Still love Nakaruru though. And that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, thank you for being cool, and thank you for spending a bit of your spare time with me. What are your thoughts on the Samurai Shodown series? Have you played Shodown RPG? Let me know in the comments below. Let's have a little discussion about slashing and dashing. If you liked the video, please give it a little like. Shout out to our patron, Aaron! Thank you, Aaron. If you want to join our Patreon, head over to patreon.com/RPGfort. All tiers get your name in the end of the video, you get to vote in polls, and you get a fancy Shining Force themed Discord role. Cool! Join for as low as $1 a month and help put my cats through cat college. Well, that's it for me today. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time when I look at something involving smashing goblins in the face, I guess. For RPG Fortress, my name is Richard. See you next time, and do not forget to hug a cat. Goodbye for now.